It's Friday, March 5th, and the time for your Barbados Today morning news update. The private sector is expected to undergo significant restructuring and downsizing for at least the next 24 months, but it could last much longer depending on COVID-19. President of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, TRISHA TANNIS, tells Barbados Today that projections of modest growth may not be a true depiction of the reality on the ground. Coming out of last year's COVID-19 lockdown, economists predicted that it would take no less than 2 years for the business sector to recover. And while the BCCI has not fully assessed the long-term impact of the current shutdown, the preliminary outlook is bleak.
We're still looking pretty much at least another, 2-year time frame before we can begin to start to see genuine organic growth. And I emphasize that because what we're having is projections of a modest growth year on year. And of course, when you have a year like 2020 where there's a huge decline, anything registers as a growth. But what we really want to see is the economy return to pre-COVID-19 levels of buoyancy before we can really start talking about growth. What we can start talking about is recovery. We must not confuse recovery with growth necessarily in the same context, because if you have hit rock bottom, anything is growth. Yeah. So really and truly to have a meaningful conversation or dialogue, we really want to be talking about recovery to the point that we were before COVID, and certainly that's going to take at least another 24 months.
TANNIS says not even the current reopening of some businesses could spare the country from private sector layoffs.
It means that companies are still going to be going through periods of restructuring, right-sizing, some, yes, downsizing. I believe that's going to continue. We saw that, and it started in a fairly significant way in 2020, but you are going to see that continuing and deepening as a result of this current lockdown, which would have dealt another blow to any business recovery efforts. Being second lockdown in less than a year, we all know why, we understand the context, but at the end of the day, the reality is and the consequences, are also there as well.
The COVID-19 pandemic has put the multi-million-dollar renovation of Harrison's Cave on pause. Mark Melville, the Chief Executive Officer of Chukka Caribbean Adventures, the Jamaican company which runs the St. Thomas attraction, tells Barbados Today while everything was in place for work to begin, the current restrictions were hampering plans. Last December, government awarded Chukka a 25-year lease to operate the cave. The company is investing $9 million to transform Harrison's Cave into a once-in-a-lifetime experience for locals and visitors. Work was scheduled to begin early this year, but has been pushed back due to restrictions imposed because of COVID-19. The Barbados Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools is adopting a wait-and-see approach to the resumption of school and the upcoming CSEC and CAPE exams. President Stephen Jackman said the association is currently content to continue consultations with the Ministry of Education, the Caribbean Examinations Council, and other stakeholders on the way forward in education. Responding to questions about CXC's decision to host this year's exams from June 14th to July 16th in the traditional face-to-face format, he said principals were eagerly awaiting the results of a fact-finding exercise currently being conducted by the ministry. He said once that is completed, the association would be in a better position to provide a definitive perspective on the developments.
At the moment, the ministry is engaged in a fact-finding exercise, and therefore we can't say where we are until we have the results of that. The Ministry of Education, the Principals Association, everybody is being guided by the Ministry of Health. As soon as the Ministry of Health gives the okay, then we'll be able to tell you all something. But we are being guided by the Ministry of Health, as is the case with the whole island.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To news from our Caribbean neighbors now, Venezuela rejects claims of intimidation by Guyana after officials in Georgetown said 2 fighter jets from Caracas flew over the country's airspace on Tuesday. Gordon Mosley of News Source Guyana continues to track the story.
In the wake of the Guyana government's condemnation of an incursion by Venezuelan fighter jets over Bang and Region 7 on Tuesday, the Venezuelan government is rejecting the claims and is now accusing Guyana of making false accusations. In a statement, the Ministry of Popular Power for Foreign Relations in Venezuela rejected what it called the inaccuracies and false accusations made by the Guyana Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Venezuelan authorities have accused the Guyanese government of trying to generate what it terms a false version of the events which took place and called the exercise a regular patrol. The incursion by the Venezuelan fighter jets was captured on camera by residents in the Bang area. The Venezuelan government said it has reminded the Guyana Foreign Ministry that since there is what it calls a dispute over the Essequibo region, neither Guyana or Venezuela can refer to the territory as their own. But the dispute referred to by Venezuela was settled in 1899, after more than 50 years, when a tribunal found that Essequibo rightfully belongs to Guyana. Despite that tribunal ruling, Venezuela continues to claim Guyana's territory. The government of Guyana has moved to inform the international community of the latest acts of aggression from Venezuela.
And finally, the death rate from COVID-19 is about 10 times higher in countries where half or more of the population is overweight. That's according to a report which was released this week by the World Obesity Federation entitled COVID-19 and Obesity, the 2021 Atlas.
The majority of global COVID-19 deaths have been in countries where many people are obese, a worldwide study found on Thursday, with coronavirus fatality rates 10 times higher in nations where at least 50% of adults are overweight. The report, which described a dramatic correlation between countries' COVID-19 death and obesity rates, found that 90% or 2.2 million of the 2.5 million deaths from the pandemic so far were in countries with high levels of obesity. Olivia Barata Cavalcanti is a doctor and Director of Science and Programs at the World Obesity Federation.
So this is not exactly surprising. The surprising part is that governments haven't really acted on obesity until now. So now we have this perfect storm of obesity pandemic and COVID-19 pandemic.
The study analysed the COVID-19 death figures from Johns Hopkins University in the United States and the World Health Organization's Global Health Observatory data on obesity. Strikingly, the authors said there is no example of a country where people are generally not overweight or obese having high COVID-19 death rates. The report found that in the US and Britain, for example, both COVID-19 death rates and obesity levels were among the highest.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.